My name is Will Lollie. I am a tattooer at Kings Ave Tattoo. Coming this April will be my 25th anniversary of tattooing.
Check this out.
So Don Ed Hardy is an incredibly significant character to tattoo culture. I get it, like my mom will look at the shirts and they'll see the drawing and the lady will be like slightly cross-eyed or like the lines won't be like super crisp or whatever, and my mom's like, I don't get why that's a good drawing. For me, the power in Ed stuff is like a lot of energy and stuff, but the relevance that he has to tattoo culture as a whole is he was the first person to do a lot of stuff, you know? If tattooing started in America and took off in the 1890s, or he started in the like 60s and continued into present day. He was the first person to go to Japan and tattoo. He was the first Westerner to tattoo in Japan ever. That was in the early 70s. And to my knowledge, he brought the electric tattoo machine with it and changed tattooing in Japan forever. And you can see almost overnight like what effect that had on design and stuff, because the tattooing by hand stuff is like less detailed, more open, more simple, big curves, stuff like that. And it almost overnight went into like details and patterns and kimonos and like more intricate, fancy stuff. And so that alone was like, that cemented his place in tattoo history forever. But then you look at like the late 70s and 80s and 90s that he did, and basically he took his art background and he did, it was like, let's just see what the fuck we can do with this. And that's what he did. He basically did any type of art form, abstract, Japanese, any sort of art form. He did it in a tattoo form, and he was the first person to ever do it. He did a thing, I think, kind of as like a joke for a painting, or just like a random stream of consciousness kind of imagery. But it would be like mixing animals with, like make a flower, but like all these weird animal parts that are kind of integrated into the anatomy of the flower. Most people today will refer to those as like panther morphs. So it's like a panther morphing into a rose, you know, that sort of imagery. That's really iconic for him. But besides that, he would take new ideas and like, for instance, the classic Black Panther, he did a version of it where it was like faded and smudged and smeared. So it'll be like the regular tattoo and then the regular tattoo, but as if you took an eraser to the middle of it, you know? Just unique stuff. It was basically like, oh, I've never seen that, but it's visual and I can recreate it, so let's fucking do it, you know? And it was like he blew the doors open on what you could get, you know, because you could get anything. You could get fucking anything. That led to a whole decade of experiments. And that kind of like took us back, starting in the 2000s, back to the traditional element of tattooing. Because like for me, for instance, I started in 1994. I started about the time I hit a decade of tattooing, or close to it. I started seeing tattoos that I did the decade prior. And I could see like what time it did to them, what the biology and the way things had aged did to them. And it completely shook me on how I should approach tattooing. It made me want to get back to the foundations of things. And that was, I think that was a consensus across the board amongst tattooers, because you'll see it in the publications of the times and all of that sort of stuff. There was a big like, some people will even say it like a regression, because like people were getting back to the foundations of like what makes a good tattoo. It wasn't about like, it's visual, you can put it on there and like, who cares what it looks like 20 years from now? It was like, no, we want to make tattoos that last, and you know, what you're getting today is what you're gonna have tomorrow, and it shouldn't look much different, you know? And that was a pretty profound moment. It's like we had this decade or more of experiment, and then we saw the repercussions of it, and then the trends kind of molded out of a realization of past mistakes and failed experiments, basically. Yeah. And besides that, he changed the tattoo culture immensely, because when he went to Japan, he learned, up until then, it was like the street shop environment where, you know, the classic shop where you walk in, there's a bunch of guys smoking and cussing and shit, and then there's like designs all over the wall. He took that out of it and he made it more like the Japanese Harishi style, where it was a private studio and it was just you and your client, and the design was a one-off. It was like it was made specifically for that person. So he opened up the very first truly custom tattoo studio in America, and he was probably he was like one of the few people who had that. He almost had a monopoly on that in America for, you know, a good 20 years, you know. Starting in 1988, it wasn't, to my knowledge, until like 1988, 89, there weren't more people who got into the business and kind of proliferated that idea. And that's when I started getting interested in tattoos. That's what made me fascinated with it, because it took it out of like the cookie cutter brand, sort of your options were limited, and it opened a world up to like, this is just like drawing. This is just like anything else. Let's just do anything. You know, we can literally do anything. And you see that reflected in the 90s tattooing. Like, people think of Ed Hardy as being a traditional tattooer, but Ed Hardy's about the new schoolest tattooer you've ever seen in your life. And he created the new school because he was doing all the experimenting first, you know. He's the guy who brought all of the people in the industry who were the most creative, the most innovative people that turned us into what we are today. He's the one that kind of like brought them in.